Hello. It's always a little awkward starting these videos, and also I guess at this point I don't even really know who my main audience is. Not sure the majority of who's actually watching this even is coming from now. But I always feel obligated to do one of these. I also find it kind of interesting to look back on these a year later. My yearly update video accompanied with my yearly stream. Might stream one more time for those who missed my yearly stream, which was a couple weeks ago at this point. But hello to anyone who still cares to know what's going on with me. Um, I find it interesting. I went back and looked at my video from a year ago. I think I'm wearing the exact same hoodie. Basically sitting in the exact same spot with the exact same headset with the exact same setup, computer rig and everything. But in a very different circumstance. Last year I was coming off of a Worlds run that, in the moment felt really bad because we lost a tiebreaker and did not escape groups, and I was very exhausted. Worlds is the most fun part of the year and also the most exhausting part of the year, from my perspective, in my opinion. From working now, I've just finished up my second year in um, I don't want to say in esports because I was in esports, although the second full year in a professional full-time setting, so to speak. Um, for those who not in the loop, I am an assistant coach for Team Liquid LCS. Um, and I guess I never really know where to go with these. I'm kind of just talking, but I guess we could start there. Kind of like reflecting on the year. Um, in a way, it was kind of similar. We'll just go through it, I guess. um, so I don't think this was ever really made public. I don't really know if I ever talked to anyone about this outside of the team, but I had reservations going into the year about what my role would be because, for those who don't know, last year I was brought on as a two-way coach at the start of the year. Then when the whole Jap fiasco happened, a couple weeks into summer, I was moved up to the main team to be an assistant coach, and I found that not as the assistant coach, the second coach on stage, we only had two coaches, and all the way through Worlds, from when I got promoted around, I want to say it was third or fourth week of summer, maybe even fifth week of summer, straight through all the way to the end of the year, when we lost the tiebreaker at Worlds. I was the second coach on stage. I was the only assistant coach. I was going to say main assistant coach, but I was the only one. Um, and Jonas, or Cold, as he's known, was the main head coach, as the interim. And then obviously this year we brought on Andre, or Giotto, as he's probably better known as, and we retained Cold. So my role was kind of murky, and going into the year, I wasn't particularly enthused by what it entailed. So after we won lock-in, I was actually planning to leave and probably head back to Riot. Um, and for those who don't know, I worked at Riot for about 2.5 years as a member of the game analysis team, formerly known as the playtest team, which is just a group of high elo players who test upcoming content that can range from like balance patches to like champions and preseason stuff, all that stuff. Um, so I was making plans to head back there. Um, while I was in the process, because Riot has a pretty lengthy interview process, even for like returning riders like myself, um, I stayed on as TL in a part-time capacity, and I was honestly pretty hands-off for most of spring. I would chat with the players every now and then, chat with the staff every now and then, but for the most part, I was quite hands-off. Uh, for the finals weekend in Houston, I did travel with the team. I was with the team for a majority of playoffs, um, and I took a lot of notes, saw a lot of things that I was interested in maybe working on. Um, but at the end of the day, I knew I was probably leaving. Um, but after the way things ended in Houston, We had some internal discussions. I was a couple days away from finalizing my departure when I was asked by management if I would be interested in returning for the summer split. If I was put into a similar position, uh, uh, basically as the one last year when I got moved up in 2021 summer, and it was an enticing offer, so I decided to take it. And so I traveled with the team for the Korean boot camp, and I was the second coach on stage alongside Gyoto for all of summer. And obviously, at this point, it's been over a month now since we lost in playoffs to EG. Um, it honestly took me like 3 weeks for it to even really settle in. I don't want to say I took the Worlds experience and the playoffs run last year for granted, because I worked my ass off for that run, and I worked my ass off in this year's run too. Even though the obviously the results weren't what we wanted. I don't really feel like I took it for granted, but I definitely did not grasp like how terrible it would feel to miss Worlds, especially because one of the big reasons I did even entertain the idea of coming back and did end up coming back after last year was I was really looking forward to Worlds in North America, and being, up on that stage and really like getting another crack at the Worlds teams. It's it's a funny kind of timing for this to be something I'm talking about, because we're coming off of going 0-9 in the first week of Worlds, and with that context, it really puts the fact that we went 3-3 and lost a close tiebreaker to what was very clearly, in my opinion, the best team in the group. That we unfortunately had to play in the four-way tiebreaker rule. Into perspective, I'm sure pretty much any of the North American teams, if you told them they would end up in a 3-3 and lose a tiebreaker, at this point they would be ecstatic. But I'm sure the fans would be too, honestly, considering how lethargic we've looked in the first week. But that's not really what I want to talk about. Though to be fair, I'm not really sure what I am talking about. It is kind of just reflecting on the year, talking about a couple things that I just want to kind of like put to. It's not even put to paper. That's not the correct expression. I'm just talking into a webcam. But I guess just a couple things I wanted to like get off my chest. To anyone who will really bother listening, once again, I don't really know who's watching this, how many people are gonna watch this, but I just wanted to share some musings that I've been reflecting on in the free time I've had ever since we've lost. It's fascinating. I don't want to say it's fascinating, but it's definitely always jarring when your season ends abruptly. The thing is, like, at the end of the day, if you measure your success of a season based on winning Worlds, that one being every other team that doesn't win Worlds, which is every team except one at the end of the year, that would be categorized as a failure. And you know, I've been playing League at a high level, and I say high level as in like being like Diamond 1 plus in North America for 10 years now. I started playing the game in Season 2. I hit Diamond 1 99 LP in Season 3, and I've been, at that MMR ELO threshold at the minimum like every year since then. And I'm a very competitive person. I don't think I would have come back and left Riot and gone into esports if I wasn't. Um, but I also do think you have to be realistic and understand that if you categorize your year as anything but winning Worlds as a failure, then you're just going to be unhappy all the time. Not to say, I'm not saying that I wouldn't categorize our year as a failure, because I do think with all the expectations that were placed on us, and I'll talk about expectation a little bit later. Um, we were certainly supposed to finish better than what we finished. I think making Worlds was a bare minimum for the roster, and I don't think that was an unreasonable goal by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, when you go from working, 10, 14, 16 hours a day, and then you lose, your season ends, and suddenly you have absolutely nothing in your schedule, um, you have a lot of time to think and reflect, and it really puts a lot of things into perspective. Um, to talk about expectation and kind of like the weight of that, it's very interesting because when I was growing up and I was in school, my parents, I have very traditional Asian parents. They place there's a lot of weight of expectation for me to, get good grades, get into a good college, and make a good stable living. And it's kind of funny talking about that now when I'm looking at the camera at 5 a.m. in the morning and reflecting on my thoughts after a year of working as a coach in esports. Something about that is just hilarious. But there was a lot of expectations placed on me to like perform well when I was growing up. Then there was this kind of a null period where I had a lot of heart-to-heart discussions with my parents about how I just really did not enjoy school and whatnot. And when I started working at Riot, all the expectations that ever really were on me at that point were, of my own doing. There was no longer really any expectations being placed on me from outside sources. I was just, working a stable job, and I had expectations of myself to do my job well and, be a well contributing member of the team I was on. But obviously nothing external. And even last year, when I started, I was mainly working with Academy in the spring split, and TL Academy was coming off of 10th place finish. There was virtually no expectations on us, and Academy obviously always has lower expectations of performance than LCS anyway. Not many people watch Academy, and there's not usually a lot of weight placed on success in Academy because it is a developmental league. When I got moved up to LCS in summer, there was certainly some level of expectation. We had a good roster. People expected us to do well, but we were such a mess throughout the regular season in summer, and the fact that we went into the playoffs as I believe we were the fifth seed. We were the fourth or fifth. We were not a high seed, and we had a very turbulent regular season with the Alfari drama and the Centauran sickness and whatnot. So there was always like some level of expectation and like being placed on us to perform, but nothing even close to what was this year, because it's like we overperformed in playoffs relative to what we were expected to do last summer, and then at Worlds, no one ever really has any expectation on you. I'm pretty sure a lot of people expected us to go 0-6, so we ended up going 3-3, losing to the best team in the group. In what I still think is a terrible tiebreaker format, but it is what it is. But that compared to what happened this year was night and day. From the very beginning, the expectations placed on us from not just the public, but also upper management about what this roster needed to do to be labeled as a success was crazy. It had been a long time since I really felt that level of expectation, and at least as far as the public expectation goes, I did not do myself any favors. I read Reddit, like the TL subreddit, the main League of Legends subreddit, Twitter, even like the Team Liquid Discord, far more than I definitely should. It's a terrible habit that I did my best to break. I uninstalled Twitter on a lot of my platforms, blocked blocked the website on my home desktop, never logged in on my work PC. I did my best to tune it out, but it was kind of unavoidable, really. And it was kind of crazy because once again, like I spent a lot of my childhood like dealing with that, but it's very different from when it's your parents who are well intentioned to um, everybody in the public basically demanding that uh, we're expected to finish first, and anything other than first is a failure. We're supposed to go like 18-0 in regular season, anything else is a failure. It's crazy. Um, my only response to it was every single time we lost, every single time we lost a scrim, lost a stage match, lost anything, was to work harder. And I think everybody on the team really felt that. And people do uh, people do a lot of weird things when they're under stress, when they're not thinking in the right mind. Especially when League is still at its core a game that is very there's just so many variables. Is the best way I think I can put it succinctly, and I think the public as well as ourselves in terms of like the staff, the management, even the players themselves, I do think we kind of, I guess to use the direct TL quote from our squad video, we did make each other worse in that sense because we expected more out of each other than maybe was fair at times. Maybe it was justified at times, but regardless of whether it was or wasn't, I do think we put a lot of pressure on each other and made each other worse. I do think, you know, like I've already admitted, I read a lot of Reddits. Like I do think there were players at times who didn't work as hard as they probably should have. Players and staff. I don't want to leave anybody out. I think like everybody could have worked harder. Um, but at the end of the day, would it have been enough? That's very hard to say. We were very, very close. Um, the fact that we lost two best of fives in game fives in honestly devastating fashion both times. Um, it leaves a lot of what ifs in your head. I even more so than last year, especially actually way more so than last year. At least when it comes to North NA playoffs, LCS playoffs, uh, can confidently say I don't think I realistically could have worked harder this year. I will say last year after we beat 100 Thieves in winners finals and we were guaranteed grands finals, and honestly, like to me, the difference between first and second when it comes to worlds, first and second seed from North America when it comes to worlds is very minuscule. I don't think we're ever favored to make it out of our group regardless. Um, Definitely diminished how much I worked, at least in the very last week, going up into the finals. Um, I don't want to absolve myself too much, but I do think there nothing I would have done in that last week of prep before we played 100 Thieves in the finals last year would have changed the outcome at all. But that being said, I think there was a multitude of things that led to the failure of this roster, and I think pinning the blame on any one individual is a complete sham. It was just a collective failure across the board, and I think it's easy to reflect and say I could have done X, X, and X differently, but I do think at the end of the day, fundamentally, this team just didn't really work together. I think there were just too many differing voices and differing ideas, playstyles of how to play the game, and when you're a veteran of League of Legends, it's very, very hard to change your core values and the core way you want to play the game, especially when you're under pressure, and we were never not under pressure. We were just constantly under pressure, and because of the fact that even the slightest misstep and like the most meaningless best of one loss meant that we were failing. I think constantly people were being forced to. People were just never comfortable, and when you're uncomfortable, when you're under stress, you revert to habits, and we had a lot of bad habits. Um, I think that's the way I would describe it. It's very interesting because to me it was like it was very different from last year. Last year there were a lot of problems, both in game and out of game, but the out of game ones kind of exacerbated the in-game ones, and it almost felt futile to kind of address some of them because the out-of-game ones were just so glaring. Whereas this year, at least in the context of summer, I can't speak too much for spring because I was very disconnected in spring from the team. I didn't really feel like there was a ton of out-of-game problems. I think there's always going to be some degree of them. I don't want to get into them specifically, but it felt largely in-game problems this year as opposed to out-of-game. And last year I felt like naively those would be easy to solve comparatively to the out-of-game ones. But after experiencing, the level of in-game problems we had to really come together and play good League of Legends as a unit of 5, I'm thinking maybe I might have been a little bit off on that one. I do think it was a bit of a unique scenario. I do think the fact that, once again, like all the external factors of the pressure that was put on us and the kind of amalgamation of players where everybody had very, very strong ideas on how to play the game. Everyone has a lot of veterancy, so it is very, very hard to break those habits. I think this may have been a very exceptional case. But it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. It's interesting. As far as my future goes, nothing's been decided. I don't know whether I'll be continuing on next year at TL or, maybe heading back to Riot or going to another team, whatnot. I haven't really decided. I've been in talks with some people about some future plans, but nothing is set in stone. I'm leaving all my options open at the moment. Funnily enough, I've been playing a lot of League. I've been playing. You would think I would think I would be like pretty done with League, but I actually was super excited to play League like when our season ended. There are a couple reasons for that. I think some of them I shouldn't talk about, but I've actually been enjoying the game a lot. And this was the year that I don't know if I played more this year or last year. I think I actually probably at this point have played more this year. But the Korean boot camp experience I had playing solo queue there and also coming back and just playing League in this past kind of month since we've been eliminated really made me rediscover my kind of love for the game. When you play the game as long as I have, you can kind of lose sight of what made the game fun, especially because the game is so different now than when I started, and both my life situation and the game itself is so different. I've always been a huge proponent of needing to continually play the game and update your concepts of how to best play the game and how to best enjoy the game. I do think if you don't constantly play as a coach, even, you lose sight of kind of like your game sense, your game feel. There's no real good way to describe it, but I do think if you don't enjoy the game, you don't play the game, you won't be your ability to coach the game and talk to players about the game will be diminished. And at the end of the day, I think having a passion for what you do is super, super important. And I think coaching League, playing League, it's no different. Any competitive thing, if you enjoy doing it, I think you'll have a big advantage. And I think my experiences this year just kind of reaffirmed that. League is such a fun game. I just wish the solo queue experience wasn't as miserable as it is sometimes, because I think the people you have to play League with in solo queue is the worst part of League. I think the game itself is honestly super fun. I know people in the past would have called me just a shill because saying that when you work at Riot is, it could be misconstrued, but I guess you could say I'm working in esports as a coach for League of Legends. I have a ulterior motive to kind of prop the game up, but there's gonna be 200 people who watch this video. that is my honest take. I think League is such a great game, even all these years later. Um, I wish it was easier to get into. Um, and the solo queue experience wasn't so miserable, and the returning player experience wasn't so miserable, so more people could, reconnect with the game or just start playing the game. But it is what it is. What else did I want to talk about? It's interesting. Last year, after we lost in Worlds, I didn't want to play any League. I was looking for like any excuse to not play League, which is part of why I was unsure I was gonna be willing to come back and do another year of this. But I guess because I don't even guess it's because the Worlds experience is exhausting. I think I talked about it. Holy shit, this video is 25 minutes already. I think I talked about it at the start a little bit, but Worlds is the most exhausting, but also the most fun part. Um, I my year would still be going. It's kind of crazy to think about because I've been off for so long now, and if you're on a bottom team that doesn't even make playoffs or you're out before us, like you get even more time, which to me is absolutely crazy. Um, I would maybe feel differently about how I'm viewing League if I was still working and having to sit in on scrims and prepare pick ban and obviously be at Worlds. But um, it's interesting to this year because I worked even harder, I would say, this year than last year, and this is going to sound like incredibly naive, but it's it's been a long time since I've ever worked this hard at anything and like not succeeded. Obviously, like success it comes in many shapes and forms. Um, some would argue fourth place in LCS is it's nice. Maybe not the best time to say that considering we're getting destroyed at Worlds, but obviously at least from my perspective, like and many others, this year was not a success. Um, and it hit me really hard at the start because I've worked really hard and like what you always get taught growing up, it's like when you work hard, you get rewarded. And I'm sure it's funny because that is true for a lot of fields, but obviously competition is a bit different. Um, and I wasn't so naive to think like that would always be true, but kind of like the failure of this year really affirmed how much it feels bad, and I think it's topical. If you're watching this right as it drops, to shit on LCS for not working hard. And don't get me wrong, I think there are a lot of players who don't work hard, but for all the players and staff who don't, there's a large amount that work really fucking hard, and not everyone can win. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like if you base your success off of having to win everything, then almost everyone is a failure, and I just don't think that's the case. I guess this is more to like the public-facing fans more than anything who don't really know. Uh, a lot of people do work hard, even in LCS. Um, I don't know exactly how much Korean and Asian teams work. Obviously, there's some things that are spoken about on social media and whatnot about how much they work. Um, a lot of teams work hard in the LCS too, and unfortunately, especially this year at Worlds, you're not really seeing the payoff for that. But I want to say a lot of people do work hard, even in an NALCS, but hard work does not always equal success, especially against the Asian teams. Um, and I could say it because I actually went this year after playing Korean solo queue. I could say that in and of itself is such a almost insurmountable advantage. The fact that you can queue up, get games really fast at really high level with really high level players almost all the time. Um, it's a lot easier to do than Champions queue. The pool is a lot bigger because you'll actually run into people you've never heard of, Smurf accounts you don't know, and they'll just absolutely destroy you. Um, and the fact that your ping is just always good, pretty much. If you're in Korea, maybe like for Chinese teams, it's a bit worse. But playing on that ping, I only played there for 2 weeks. I played like 180 games in like 14, 15 days or something. I loved the experience. But even then, it's like I could feel how much better I was getting just in that short time frame, and being able to play that full time, it's crazy. Yeah, it's like it's almost impossible to explain how much better your mechanics will be uh, from being able to play in that environment. And I think it's interesting because I think every year I have actually gotten to play against some of the pros, against some of the pros in NA Solo Queue this year. Um, Obviously not as much because a lot of them are playing Champs Queue, but I think it's interesting. I guess it's been a long time. A lot. It's been 6 years, unless you count like All Stars, which I don't think a lot of pros come when they come for All Stars really play solo queue. And I guess for EU you could say like Rift Rivals back when that was a thing, but it's been like 6 years, and since Worlds is in North America, for pros to really experience how bad North American solo queue is compared to Korean solo queue. Um, so it's interesting. Um, and I wonder if like the how many of the Asian pros when they play North American solo queue and then have to go back and have to experience how bad it is, really appreciate how good it is to be able to play like Super Server solo queue or Korean solo queue, because the difference is absolutely night and day. Um, just accounting for like player quality, not even accounting for like ping and whatnot, which is obviously also a huge issue. It's it's honestly it's not even close. It's just completely incomparable, and it makes me sad because I don't really know. I don't really think there is any solution to make it even remotely resembling Korean solo queue. But I guess it is what it is. I don't want to make this into a whole section of me coping about why North America can't perform at Worlds or why we suck or whatever. Just something interesting, because I do think starting from season 8, I think season 8 was what I like to call like the huge real like modernization period of League of Legends, where the game you start getting I think like teams really started getting like hands checked or mechanic checked, um, with the introduction of a lot of like champion kits that came in from season 8. And I want to say from like season 8 to like 10 there was like a lot of high mechanical champions, and your ability to kind of take them to another level really matters. I don't want to say matters because it's always mattered to be like good at champions and to be very good at laning, but I think season 8 is where it really kind of took off and became like a huge actual like win condition where it's like and I think you're seeing it now where it's like a lot of the North American games against the Asian teams, you can kind of just feel like they're just going to lose. At least I don't know if like average layman viewer will see that, but almost all the North American games, I think I tweeted about this too. It's just depressing because if you're watching the game and you're really really watching closely, kind of like the trading patterns and just like how the team fights are approached, how objectives are set up, and kind of like the in-fight micro of the Asian teams versus the North American teams. I can watch one fight and I know who's going to win. I can turn off the nameplates and just kind of know whether a team's just outclassed or not. And it's very clear that the North American teams at this year's Worlds are very outclassed. A part of me wonders how much of that is the fact that most of the time you get to boot camp before an event in like Korea, and you kind of get like a couple weeks to sharpen your mechanics to a point where you won't lose the game in lane, and you can actually kind of get to play mid games out, which are also not favored by the way. Like Asian teams are just on average much better at playing objective setups and fight setups and actual team fighting, and beating them there is also really hard. But you have to get through lane first without losing the game in the first 14 minutes, and I think the absence of a boot camp to really kind of get those mechanics up to par definitely has hurt. But once again, don't want to cope too much. Don't want to talk too much about why we're failing. Um, but yeah, just another interesting observation I've had watching Worlds as a spectator, which is Also, a very odd experience for me. The last time I watched Worlds as a full spectator was 2017. From 2018 to 2020, I worked on the Worlds patch when I was at Riot. I had like a decent amount of input on targets and targets that we would kind of shoot for, and like things to buff and nerf for Worlds. And then obviously 2021, I was an active Worlds participant. So this is the first Worlds in a long time that I've actually really just had no part in, either as a participant or as someone who kind of helped create, I guess, the meta. So it's been an interesting experience. I'm actually going to be at New York for quarterfinals, and I plan to go to San Francisco for finals as well. Funnily enough, this year the finals are on my birthday exactly, so that'll be kind of fun. Um, I told myself 6 years ago, the last time Worlds was in North America, that I would go to the next one because I did miss it, and I regret. If I had known it would be 6 years until it came back, I definitely would have gone. But definitely not gonna make that mistake this year. And the way things are going, this might be the last time Worlds is in North America when North America is a major region. So definitely can't miss out. Obviously the prices are a little expensive, but you know I think it'll be fun. It's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. Trying to think of what else I really want to talk about. I think I've talked on the big things that I was really wanting to get off my chest. I guess another thing that I reaffirmed this year was it's kind of interesting, like the player lens is what I'll call it. When I worked at Riot, um, I think my player lens, and I'll kind of use this in quotations because it's not like a scientific thing. It's just kind of like my ability to kind of take myself out of my shoes and put myself into like what an average player who plays the game across brackets too. It's like the person who plays the game like twice a week versus and like the player who plays in high elo and plays like 5 games a day. I think my ability to kind of empathize with them and put myself in their shoes because of kind of all the experiences I've had in League of Legends was very strong. And the player lens means something else working as a coach, in the sense that like putting myself into the shoes of one of my own players and trying to think about how they feel on stage in certain situations or how they feel in certain draft situations is also really important. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, I guess, but it's been fascinating to kind of hone that and refine that and kind of understand how it is different but also similar. How like being able to put myself in the shoes of someone else in these senses has been such an important part of my job, even though my job has changed radically, with the only real similarity being like I'm still working in League of Legends. Just very interesting, another musing I kind of been thinking about as I've had a lot of time to reflect after the year. Um, I've definitely done a lot of thinking about kind of what this game has given me and all the experiences I've had, both good and bad. Really playing this game for the last 11 years now, it's almost, because I started playing around Wukong patch in season 2, and now we're in season 12. It is really something. I feel like almost almost like a renaissance man of League of Legends at this point, having done individual coaching, uh, team coaching, wrote guides, did like streaming, did YouTube stuff for a bit, did uh, played collegiate league, played high school league, played Challenger Series league, and now I've coached in LCS. I've coached in academy. The only thing I didn't do is directly play an academy in LCS, but you could argue Challenger Series was like the equivalent to academy back in the day, and I did have academy offers that I did turn down while I was at Riot. So I did technically play academy, uh, but I was at least at that level. So even that perspective, I think I have a pretty good grasp on, especially now that I've coached academy players and LCS players. Um, it's just very fascinating to think about um, where I've been and potentially where I'll be in the future. Losing really makes you stop and think about life, especially when, like I said, you go from working 14 to 16 hours a day to not working at all, almost. So I think I'll cut it there. It's been I don't know how it's been 40 minutes. I don't know who the fuck's gonna watch or even listen to 40 minutes of me talking to a webcam about a myriad of topics. But for those who still follow, those who click on this video, and especially those who make it to the end, thanks for hanging around. Thanks for caring that I'm alive. And I have no idea what the future holds, whether I will upload again this year or maybe even next year. But for anyone watching, thank you. And I'm out. Peace.